So in this video, we're going to go through the invoice schedule. The invoice schedule is an additional tab that is available on the placements record. And it's essentially an area that grants you the ability to create individual invoiceable items in relation to the contract or relation to the placement. So this could be specific milestones that you've agreed with the client in terms of tasks that are being performed as part of the contract, and then when those milestones have been achieved or delivered, you can then greenlight that component to be invoiced. This area is accessed from the obviously from any placement record, but it's on the basis of user group permissions. So within admin, under user group permissions, what you'll find is an option. We'll go into an admin group here and go to back office. You'll find the options here of view invoice schedule and add/edit invoice schedule, and both those need to be set to full access. So what is possible to have is obviously users that have access to this invoice schedule and can see the elements of the invoice schedule, but not edit them or add any additional ones. And obviously, if you have them both set to full access, then obviously you have full rights to be able to add invoiceable items to this area. So if I go through the process of adding now, I'll begin with a parent item, which is ultimately the, if you like, main milestone that is being covered of the project. So if we start with a specific parent there, we can reference a purchase order, and we can also add in there an associated expected date for you to build a timeline on the basis of these schedule items. I'll pick a date in the future there, and if you wanted to, you could also attach any associated documentation in relation to the invoice item. But that creates a parent invoice item there, and then what you would go through the process of is obviously adding children that's associated to that parent. So you'd select the specific parent there, and then you would go about adding the children that are associated with the actual the work that's being undertaken. So if we add in there a value associated to this, again, you've got the ability to associate purchase orders. You would reference a status, and again, you'd have some sort of expected date in relation to that, and you'd have the ability again to upload that document. And obviously, you can see there an option that is marked as complete. We'll obviously leave that as no. Hit save there, and that obviously adds the child to the parent. If I go about adding another child now, and this time we'll say we'll add this one. Again, we'll give this a value, specify a purchase order, again, status, expected date, and then we'll hit save there. And what we're doing obviously is we're building a series of milestones, a series of objectives that are associated to the contract, and obviously on the basis of each of those elements being achieved, that will then greenlight that component to be invoiced. So again, we reference POs, we reference the values associated to the work, and then if I give this a, say an expected date there, and we hit save there. I mean, obviously, your established statement of work with regards to the contract could consist of many parents, many children, but they'll be laid out in this manner where you obviously have the parent item, and that obviously has a value field associated to it, and that value field is the auto sum of all of the values of the children beneath that parent, and essentially that gives you a feel for the total value of the project, but also the value of the individual invoiceable items. So if we now look ahead to the idea in which one of these items has now been delivered, so you have confirmation from the contractor and indeed the client that this component has now been delivered, and you can mark this item as now complete. What that will do is it will obviously put a completed date in the column for completed against this specific invoice item. And then from a back office perspective, if we go over to the back office area, this specific item is now made available as an invoiceable item. So within here, you now have a new section called schedule item. Obviously, you've got timesheets, permanence, charges that are all available in there, but you've got this schedule item option, and within there you can see that this specific schedule item, which we just marked as complete, has now been added into this section. So if we want to invoice for this, we would tick that there. We'd specify generate invoices. We'll pick a nominal there and hit OK. And then that generates the invoice record. And if we say yes to that, it will take us through into the invoice. Now, if we want to look at the actual specific invoice record, this was a previous one. If we look at the this specific one that has been raised, I'll hit edit invoice there. You can see the obviously the invoice details within the invoice record, but also you can see the specific line detail that's associated here, and obviously the tax has been pulled through and calculated as you need it to. But if we go back to list invoices there, and now we select that invoice which we've created, and we look to create the invoice document. We hit OK there. That obviously creates our invoice document so that it's ready to be processed. And if we then click on the Edit Document option, that opens up the invoice. And you can see the specific line detail there, the associated totals, and obviously the rates as calculated. And obviously this is an example demo version of the colleague sales invoice, but obviously this would be relevant to your invoicing. So that covers the new ability that obviously you have to generate specific invoice items and obviously invoice those. And then when invoices obviously have been generated from that process, the actual invoice date is then stamped against the associated item on in the invoice schedule. If I just demonstrate that, you can see there that this item now has been invoiced and on that invoice date. So that covers the functionality available from the invoice schedule.